Okay, looks like we're on now. We are in 1 Samuel chapter 6. And last week we got through the first 12 verses, I guess it was. And so just remember where we're at in the narrative. As we pick up in the middle here of chapter 6, we've seen a lot happening already, right? In these first 5.5 chapters, I guess it is. A lot going on in the story here, the narrative of Israel. Remember where we're at in the grand timeline of things. We're in the time of the judges. Excuse me. We're in the time of the end of the time of the judges, and kind of getting ready to transition. We will see the transition in this book from the time of judges into the next era, which is what? What's the next era that we're talking about biblically that comes after the time of the judges? Okay, the time of the kings, right, or the kingdom era. Good. So for about 400 years or so, let's go with a nice round number, Israel's been led by judges that God has lifted up to kind of help Israel manage through, these 400 years or so. And in that, there's been good and bad judges, and even all the judges we know do good and bad things. But essentially, we can sum up the time of the judges by the most common phrase, I believe, in the book of Judges, which says that everyone did what was right in their own eyes. And so things don't really go well when that's the case. And so we've come to a time where we've seen that the leadership of the judge at the time we started this book, remember, was Eli, and he was the high priest. His leadership, I don't know, what do you think? What would you give? What would you give as a grade for Eli's leadership that we've learned from thus far?
Like a C.
Okay. Anybody want to add another thought?
Only because of his sons, I'd give him a D
Okay.
or an F.
Yeah, there's not a right answer here. This is speculation. Yeah, so I think each one of us can give different things. Do we think that Eli never did anything good and right?
No, because I think he did a lot
Right.
of good.
Okay.
And that's, in the majority of his life, I think he tried to do right.
Maybe.
And I know how hard it has been to raise some of my children. I won't name any. But it's hard. And if God's hardened their heart, I know he had responsibility in it. I'm not taking him off the hook. I'm just saying he did a lot of good stuff too.
Yeah.
Did a good job raising Daniel.
Right? Or Samuel.
Samuel.
Right. Yeah.
Good. So he definitely had like a second chance there, maybe, and certainly with the writing on the wall, because God had told him a couple times of the judgment to come and what was happening. He knew Samuel was the next in line. He didn't pull a Saul, right? As we get into the narrative later, we'll see the Saul and David thing, but most of you kind of already know it. He didn't try to kill Samuel and cut Samuel off and cut him down.
He loved him.
He instead did the right thing and raised him there, right? Good. Yep. And so Eli did die an old man. Anybody remember? Trying to look for that to remember. Anybody remember how old Eli was when he died?
90-something.
98.
I think that was right. I was trying to look back to find it. I know it's in the end of chapter 4 somewhere. It just slips my mind. I've said it several times in the study. But I believe so. Thank you. And so, we saw how the Philistines and the Israelites went to battle. Samuel was growing in the ways of the Lord. Eli was getting older. His sons were getting more wicked. And God's providence and his judgment, he has the Philistines defeat Israel. And, 30,000 plus people die. And Hophni and Phinehas are killed. And the ark of the Lord is stolen. And when word of that comes back to the town, it doesn't go well. When word of that comes to Eli, he drops dead after falling off his chair and breaking his neck. And then when Phinehas' wife hears, she goes into labor and she dies and has a son. And so, we have a lot going on in this narrative. And then we saw how chapter 5, remember the Philistines take the ark. How did things go for the Philistines after their conquest and they had the ark? How'd that all go?
Not like they wanted.
Right. Not like
they thought.
Yeah, it was basically they were cursed.
To the victors go the spoils, but they kind of were, the spoils weren't what they thought it would be, would it? Right? The spoils ends up becoming what?
A curse.
Yeah, a curse, God's judgment in the form, remember, of tumors.
And
and
Frogs?
mice,
Mice or
you know,
frogs?
so bubonic plague possibly here and something like that with the mice ravaging the land and possibly,
Oh, yeah, mice.
probably being the cause of the tumors, some kind of disease. And so, yeah, so it wasn't going well, but they paraded it around, like Jen's mentioned, I remember last couple weeks. They paraded around the ark as, you know, our God's better than your God, although they saw that their God couldn't even stand before the God of Israel and the ark of God. And so a lot of symbolism there that we drew out of. And yeah, so as we got into chapter 6, we saw that they finally made the decision, hey, and it took them 7 months, but hey, we got to get this thing back to where it's going. And then last week we looked at, again, those first 12 verses. And remember, that was the narrative about how are we going to get rid of this thing and what are we going to do? And they gather their diviners and their priest, pagan priest, and they say, well, you got to send back a guilt offering. So we see that they understand that they're guilty of something against some God, right? But they just don't know, is it really the God of the Ark of Israel, or whatever they think is this God, or is it just coincidence? Are these things all just by chance? And so they say, hey, let's set up a test and let's see what's going to happen. And then I guess last week, remember I was saying how they stacked the deck, but however you want to say it, they were rigging the test, right? Craig, you like to use that word rigged a lot. Oh, this game's rigged, right? When the refs are calling the calls and it's not going Miami's way, it's this game's rigged. And so they were rigging the test here. And so remember, what do I mean by that? Somebody refresh our memory of last week's narrative. How did they rig the test? What did they do?
They took the cow that had babies and took the babies away from the cow, and they said
2 cows, right?
2 cows, yeah, took their babies away so that it would be a cow that had never been on a harness or whatever, the leash, the thing that they put on it.
Yoked.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
So it would never been one of those. It
Yeah.
took its babies away. So this isn't a cow that would normally pull anything or go anywhere.
Yeah.
So they just really wanted to not work out, but the cow goes directly to where
Yeah.
they don't want it to go.
A milk
It's back.
cow
They
who's
should never go to
nursing.
their babies.
Right.
Yeah, who would have, they're not beasts of burdens, these are milk cows. Their burden is that they're filling with milk, and their burden is we need to use this milk to feed our young, and they take their young away, and so they're thinking, you know, they're gonna want their young and come back or never leave, and they've never been yoked, and so they don't know what to do, right? And so all these things, you know, they put a new cart behind the cows. They put the yoke on the cows. What do they put on the new cart? They put the ark back to send back with what else? Their guilt offering. What was their guilt offering?
5 golden tumors and 5 gold rats.
Yeah, and I think we'll see in the tonight's text. I think even more, probably more golden mice than that. But gold is definitely what they're thinking. Like, it's precious to us, it must be precious to God, right? So we'll send that back, and we'll see how that goes tonight. But yeah, they send it off thinking this is never going to happen, saying, if it goes that way, then we know it was God of Israel that did this. And so then I think we left off there with verse 12 saying, nope, that's not verse 12. What does verse 12 say? And the cows went straight in the direction of Bethshemesh, along one highway, lowing as they went. They turned neither to the right nor to the left, and the lords of the Philistines went after them as far as the border of Bethshemesh. So they couldn't believe their eyes. They followed the cows to see that they just went straight course for where they were going, even as they lowed for their calves, right, and mooing the whole way. Good. Okay, so we pick up in verse 13 tonight. We're going to read through the rest of the chapter. How many verses that is? Looks like 21. So what is that? 8 verses maybe? So let's go around the horn. Zoomers, if you want to unmute and read with us, let's try to involve y'all too. It looks like that might be exactly 8 of us.
There's 9 verses.
Close, huh?
There's 9 verses.
Is there?
Yeah.
13 to, is there 21 verses or 22? Either way, it'll be close.
9.
So if you guys are good with that,
But there's Greg and Pam.
okay, it's okay.
I mean, if they both wanted to do one, there'd be 9.
Yep, if they want to do them, it's fine. Does that make sense to you guys? Let's just go right around the horn. Let's go Greg and Pam, then we'll go Tom, then we'll go Jason, then we'll go Dean and Barb, and then we'll go to Elaine. Starting at 13, and if you'll If you haven't been here with us, if you just read the verse number and then read the verse would be great. Thanks so much.
Now the people of Beth-shemesh were harvesting their wheat in the valley, and when they looked up and saw the ark, they rejoiced at the sight.
Verse 14, the cart came to the field of Joshua of Beth, and there it stopped beside a large rock. The people chopped up the wood of the cart and sacrificed the cows as a burnt offering to the Lord.
15, and the Levites took down the ark of the Lord and the box that was beside it, in which were the golden figures, and set them upon the great stone. And the men of Beth-shemesh offered burnt offerings and sacrificed sacrifices on that day to the Lord.
16, and when the 5 lords of the Philistines saw it, they returned that day to Ekron.
17. These are the golden tumors that the Philistines returned as a guilt offering to the Lord. One for Ashdod, one for Gaza, one for Ashkelon, one for Gath, one for Ekron.
18, and the gold mice according to the number of all the cities of the Philistines belonging to the 5 lords, both of fortified cities and of country villages. The large stone on which they set the ark of the Lord is a witness to this day in the field of Joshua the Beth-shemite.
19. He struck down some of the men of Beth-shemesh because they had looked into the ark of the Lord. He struck down of all the people 50,070 men. And the people mourned because the Lord had struck the people with a great slaughter.
The men of 20, the men of Beth-shemesh said, who is able to stand before the Lord, this holy God, and to whom shall he go up from us?
21, then they sent messengers to the people of Kiriath Jearim, saying, the Philistines have returned the ark of the Lord. Come down and take it up to your place.
Father, we give you thanks. As we see them offering sacrifices, we know that you desire a broken spirit and a contrite heart. And so, Lord, I pray that you would allow us to humble ourselves. We are humble in your presence as your humble servants, that you've called us to this great inheritance, this great work of salvation through Christ our Lord. We give you thanks for the text. We pray for understanding. We pray for application. And Lord, that you would just continue to grow us to be more like you. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so excuse me. Back to verse 13. Oh, let me see if that'll work. Okay, so back to verse 13. Here we have Beth-shemesh. We talked about that city a little bit last week. That's the city that they're trying to send the cows and see if it goes off that way. And so now we're kind of on the other side of the story, right? We've been in Philistia and in the 5 cities of the Philistines, and we've seen what's happened there. They're now they're following these cows, and now we flip, and now we're on the Israelite side. Now here's Israelites and Beth-shemesh, and it says they were reaping their wheat harvest in the valley, and they saw the ark, and they were glad to see it. And so I think certainly they'd be glad to see it, and we'll talk about this as we move through the text, but different reactions certainly, of the ark, and just think about the last maybe emotion, the last time the Israelites saw the ark. What was that like? Remember the context of what's happening. So 7 months earlier, how are the Israelites feeling about the ark? What happened?
Great loss, defeat,
Good.
punishment.
Yeah. Sadness. All of that. Because remember, the context is exactly that. 7 months earlier, they were in battle, and 2 Levites, which we know who that was. Who were the ones carrying the ark? Hophni and Phinehas. Remember? So 2 Levites leave with the ark and are killed in battle. And now, 7 months later, what a picture here, right? God brings the ark of the Lord back with 2 cows. So 2 Levites leave with it and die, and 2 cows now bring it back. because again, the sovereignty of the Lord and how he works. And this is how God chooses to bring his glory back to Israel. And that's really kind of a theme that we see in this. And I've got, you'll see the verses down there, because that's the end of chapter 4. We kind of talked about it in our review. But remember, I have Ichabod there, because what does that mean? Anybody remember what's this Ichabod all about in the end of chapter 4?
No glory is what it means. It was the son that one of the sons had when she dies in labor after they're killed, and she says no glory because
Okay. Yeah, remember it was Phinehas's wife, and when she hears the word of the Lord, she was pregnant and she went into labor. She died in labor, and before she died, she called the boy Ichabod. Yeah, meaning no glory, because remember it says a couple times there in the end, the glory has departed from Israel, right? So that's what it looked like 7 months ago. Now here come two cows bringing in a cart, and lo and behold, here's the ark strolling back into our town. So now how do they feel? Totally different, right?
yeah, so they're happy.
I mean, just in an
Look happy.
instant, in a moment, you have a great change in the demeanor, in the morale, and the attitude of Israel, right? Now, I understand this is one town in Israel, but the word, is going to spread quickly. And so, just thinking about that in our own lives, I thought of Ephesians 3:20. Anybody happen to know that verse by memory? Know it by heart? That's okay. Whoever's flipping to it, let's flip there and read it. It's a great verse to memorize for sure. Aren't they all? I mean, I
I was
think.
gonna say, you say that a
So
lot.
many.
Now to him who is able to do far more abundantly beyond all that we ask or think, according to the power that works within us.
Yeah, I think that's a great one to commit to memory. Now unto him who is able to do exceedingly abundantly above and beyond. Different versions say different words there, but I like to use them all because that's God. Exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think. You know what I mean? Just think about that. Exceedingly above, you know what I mean? Just more and more, kind of like with John, grace upon grace. He's able to do more exceedingly and more exceedingly good than you could ever imagine. I think that's in Corinthians 2, right, where Paul writes that no eye has seen and no ear has heard and no, it hasn't entered into the mind of man, all that God has in store for those who love him. Like, in other words, you can't even imagine how good God is and what great things is going to be and what greatness it's going to be just being with him forever. We're just clueless, and it would just blow our minds to even understand it to any degree, Yeah, Lane, thoughts?
Well, just because it makes me think of simple moments that were obvious, something, but it was a simple moment, but it was obvious he had worked something out. This is,
Yeah, the ark's gone. We'll never get it back. What are we going to do? Like, do we have to go and fight them again after they just beat us twice? Do we got to go fight them and take this thing back? Right? Like,
No, right.
would that be what you're thinking?
Yeah.
That's going to be what we would be thinking right now.
Right, but not only do they get it back, it comes back on two cows that are like going there all by themselves, and it's got 10 times more gold on it.
Yeah, that's a good picture and a good memory. Like, think about how God has always done that.
Yeah.
Like, think about when the people of Israel left Egypt. They plundered Egypt when they left. Like, do you remember that? They leave, and it said that God put it on the hearts of all the Egyptians. They gave them all their earrings and all their gold and all their jewelry to the Israelites as they left. Like, they literally, pilfered and robbed, basically, but God did it and provided for Israel all this wealth that Egypt gave to them. And so, we could certainly probably think of so many. But yeah, here we go with just to kind of take that theme. I know Sky's not here, but I think I've shared with most of you, and I know Jason and Dean and Greg, Tom, these guys. But in the men's Bible study, we always kind of had this thing about coincidence. We'd always joke, and be like, it's a coincidence today that you did that happened to you, and joking, because there's no such thing as coincidence. But that was, remember in our text last week, they wanted to see, the Philistines did, is this just a coincidence that this is happening? And so I just say that in jest to say, and coincidentally, these two cows that leave with this cart just by chance end up in Beth Shemesh, this town of the Israelites. And they end up in the field of a man named Joshua, it says in verse 14. And so, well, I was going to ask the question, but the answer is already up there. Yeah, how do the people respond to this? When Joshua and all the Beth Shemites, how do they respond when they see this come back?
They make sacrifices.
Joyfully, right? Yeah, and I thought that's kind of where Jill was leading us to also, to say, here come these cows with a new cart, and so you literally have the wood and the sacrifice.
Here's the thing, like what you were just talking about, abundantly above what they could even fathom. Here they thought they might have to fight for it, or they'll never get it back, or all the scenarios that were going through their head. And just going to the theme that you were just talking about, abundantly more, and how God's grace and blah, blah, blah. Not only do they not have to do any of that, here it is, it's coming back, it's being led.
Yeah.
He's literally bringing it to them with sacrifices, with the wood, with the cart, with
Yeah.
all this, the 6, 5, 10, 100 mice made out of gold, whatever it is. It's like,
Yeah,
that's way different than what their expectations were.
Yeah.
After the long years of doing whatever was right in their own eyes, they're so filled with a thankfulness that they actually apply what they're supposed to do with being thankful,
yeah. Praise the Lord.
according to what the Lord wants.
Right. Well, I think you guys are making the next point that I'd like to get to of these themes we've seen. Remember, one of the main themes we've seen is transition that we've talked about through the study, and another one is contrast.
Yeah.
What do you see here? Do you see a contrast here in this text? Look at what we see between Israel and the Philistines. The Philistines, how they treated the ark, we see a contrast with how Israel treats it. Now, Israel was idolizing it and were punished for it. Philistines were idolizing it, and they weren't sure what to do about any of it. To Elaine's point, they don't know how to please God, because remember, they're not of God, and so they had no idea how to please Him, and so they send these things of gold with it, thinking that that's a good guilt offering, right? Because the guilt offering, that's what it says, send a guilt offering. And what they sent was gold, idols. And so now we see the Israelites, to Elaine's point, remembering in there somewhere that, oh yes, what pleases God and what we're supposed to do is thank Him and make a guilt offering, which is, shedding of blood of animals. And so they literally see this sign from God, and God has sent them everything they need. And I just think what a great picture that is, now as we're even talking about it.
And God, who knows all things, I learned that Beth Shemesh was one of the cities that was given to the priests.
Yes.
And so he sent it to where the offering would be appropriately.
Yeah.
He knew this was how.
Yeah. And to your point, it says, where does it say that? In verse 15, it says, the Levites took down the ark of the Lord.
Right.
So this town, Beth Shemesh, good studies there, Elaine, love it. This town was a town of the Levites. So it wasn't the tribe of Dan or Naphtali or Judah even, which we'll see Judah in the end of this text. But it's sent to a city of the Levites. And in fact, and we'll I think I got a slide on this, but we're talking about it now, so that's good. In particular, this was one of the cities that was given to the descendants of Aaron, who was the high priest and who were the priests. So remember, not all Levites are priests, right? but all priests are Levites. And so, the Levites in this town in particular was one that was of the descendants of Aaron. So that's pretty important and significant point to make, Elaine. And I think for us, seeing it that God provides this, He wants them to sacrifice and worship Him, and He provides them. He's told them and revealed to them how He instructed them how He wants them to do it, and now He even brings back His glory and bringing back opportunity and saying, "Here's what you need to do what I've asked you to do." So do you see where I'm going with that for us? Right? I mean, that's what He does. If He calls us to something, He gifts us and equips us and enables us to do it. And so there really should be no excuses, honestly, on our part to say that we can't do these things, but yet that's who we are, right? Moses says, like, I can't talk well, and God says, I made your mouth, right? I mean, that's just who we are. But in our insecurities and, our uncomfortability and all those things aren't excuses. And I hope we catch that, because even in the narrative I just went to with Moses, that's what God said to Moses. There's no excuse. Like, here, I'll give you fine, you want an excuse? There's no acceptable excuse, and I'll give you your brother Aaron, because I know he speaks well, and you can do this now. And now he's going to be part of this with you. You know what I mean? And so God made it that way. But he was basically, I mean, did he tell Jonah that, there's an acceptable excuse? There's many things that we can look at. It doesn't mean that God will always do a Jonah on us, because He may just let us go off in the sea and be eaten by the fish, or go off in the wrong direction and not bring us back. He may use somebody else to do what it is He called to do. But anyways, that's a lot of.
I think God is so gracious when you're saying that, and I always love the part, and I don't know exactly where it's at, but when Moses is talking about that, God says Aaron is already on his way. So it wasn't like this isn't a big point, because we know God knows all things, but I just love, it wasn't like Moses said something and God's like, oh, hold on, let me get your brother.
Yeah.
He already had the plan. Aaron was already on his way. Like God didn't think of that. Like, God did know Moses' mouth. I just think it's really cool.
Oh, yeah.
When you think about it, because Moses is like, hey.
Well, God had fish on the way. He had a fish on the way also.
I know. I'm just saying
for
that
Jonah.
he had the tree for Jacob or whatever.
Yeah.
There already is a plan. It's that having the faith in God's plan.
Sure.
That God already has Aaron. I've thought of that 1,000 times. Aaron's already on his way. That's just so comforting to know.
Yeah.
We're not surprising God. He does have a plan. He's already got something on its way.
Yeah.
Just like when I looked for a Reformed church in the Florida Keys,
Yes.
and he was bugging Craig.
Yeah.
He's already on his way.
Yeah. Yeah. The one that comes to mind that I'll share just because I love it, because when I saw it this way that you're saying, it just is amazing to me, is Genesis 22, which is a bucket list chapter. Genesis 22 is Abraham sacrificing his son. So we should all know what Genesis 22 is, because that's Psalm 22. That's the gospel. That's God offering His only son on Moriah. Here He calls Abraham to offer his son on Moriah. And remember, as he's going up, Abraham's willing and about to do it. And I had this picture of, Mount Moriah, and here's the mountain, and you've got Abraham ascending with his son up this way, and all the while this way, God has a ram coming up.
Yep.
That's going to get stuck in the thicket right at the top there, so that and certainly God could have created a thicket and a branch and the ram in the moment. But I like the picture of what you're talking about,
right.
that look, God is making this all happen, and that should for us just be a picture of,
Yes.
This is a picture of your life, because this is a picture of all of eternity. That I got you up there, I tested you, I'm not going to make you do it, and oh, by the way, go get that ram over there that's
the
stuck in the
lamb's on
tree.
its way.
You know what I mean? So as you're coming up this side, it's already being provided, and I think we certainly see good things in that for sure. Good. So the Levites, they take down, as I'm looking, it's already 7:25, it's crazy. As the Levites took down the Ark of the Lord, they took down the box that was with it, because what was in the box? The guilt offering, right? All the gold. And it says they put them on a large stone there, it says in verse 15. And so we talked about this already. Beth Shemesh was a town of Levites given to the descendants of Aaron. And it says the men offer burnt offerings. So to Lane's point, what a valid point and a great thought for us to just understand. Okay, yeah, these weren't just anyone that were performing these sacrifices. These were the men that God called and equipped to be the Levites and the priests to make the sacrifices, and that's who He chooses to bring the ark and the cows and the wood to, right? So no coincidences here. He brings them to them, and it says they sacrificed sacrifices to the Lord. I think it's interesting too, when you look at verse 16, it says, the 5 lords of the Philistines saw this and returned to Ekron that day. Just think about them. How do they got to be feeling? What do they got to be thinking? They followed those cows, remember? Because they're like, I bet you the cows don't make it 10 feet. Right? Well, I bet they don't make it to the fence at the end of the property. There's no way they make it down the block, right? Can you see this developing? And then they just keep following them all the way to Israel. So now they see what happens. I mean, what do they got to be thinking about here?
There is a God.
Man, you hope some of them are thinking that, right? And
You gotta be
maybe.
thinking there is no coincidence here. Like, this is incredible. They've got to be having a moment.
Right?
You'd think.
They certainly can't be thinking anymore, well, our God's better than their God.
Or this is just, like, go back to whatever that was, verse 9. This was just by chance, you know?
Right.
You know, that's got to be out of their playbook by now.
Yeah, Lord willing, it convicted some of them, and some of them believed in the God of Israel. I mean, who knows what God does? He's a great God. But and just seeing too, it doesn't tell us exactly when they left. It says they went back to Ekron that day. I tend to want to believe they stood there and watched the reaction of the Israelites. And what did they see? They see them rejoice, and then they see them offering sacrifices with the stuff that they sent to them. And perhaps they're recognizing like, oh, like their God doesn't want gold and silver. Their God wants these sacrifices, that's what pleases him. You know what I mean? And realizing how wrong they got it by sending gold to appease God. So there's just all kinds of thoughts, around that about who knows what they were thinking, but it could have been a lot of things.
But then I already snuck ahead.
That doesn't sound like you, Elaine.
Sneaking ahead is good. Me too. That is a very good thing to do.
And he kicked, and he, because they already observed that, but then when they find out that everybody has gathered, Samuel's gathered everybody, they do come to attack it, so it's not.
Yes.
And so it's not like but it was almost as if the Lord was purposely going to reverse
Yes.
the former incident.
Yeah.
Because he takes care of the situation.
Just like, and to your point, just like he did, as we keep going back to, alluding back to, but I mean, that's the one that they go back to in the narrative here. Go back to Moses in Egypt. Same thing. How God uses this, and then he flips the script. Because ultimately, he's revealing to these pagan nations that there is a true God. And it's the God of Israel. And so while I just was on your side and whooped up on Israel a little bit, I'm judging you with tumors and everything else. And I'm bringing, now that I'm back with Israel, I'm back to bring them to a place where they need to be and bring judgment on you that you deserve.
And now you're gonna doubt me?
Right. Because to Elaine's point, as you skip forward, like she's talking about in the next chapter, we're going to have war again, and we're going to have the Israelites defeating the Philistines, and so God's going to be judging again. And so, there's just so much to this, right? But again, the contrast of looking at the Philistines' guilt offering versus the Israelites' guilt offering, that the Israelites at least got it right and were obedient. You see the 5 golden tumors. And here, so it did say in last week's text, right, it said 5 golden tumors and 5 golden mice. And so I don't want us to get, and man, I just think about another topic we got to get into in a minute where we're going to have probably some pretty good discussion. So you guys probably want to be off of mute maybe, but I want to get some of your input too. But I don't want us to get hung up because we're going to get into a textual variance in a moment here where we could get in the weeds, but I hope we're not going to. But we are intentionally going to a little bit. But just remember that God's word is always accurate. It's not contradictory. So we're going to see some things in a moment here that we'll unpack. But even in this, it said back there last week in verse 6, it said 5 golden tumors and 5 golden mice, according to the number of the lords of the Philistines. So it just means we know that there's 5 cities. They're named here in the text. There's 5 golden tumors, 1 for each of the cities, 1 for each of the lords. There's also 5 golden mice for the lords and the cities. But we find out here too additional information here in verse 17 and 18. It says, and golden mice according to the numbers of all the cities of the Philistines, saying the cities and the walled cities and the country cities. So this, unpacks it a little bit more. This expounds on it a little bit more for us to say, okay, there were 5 tumors and 5 mice. Maybe the other 5 mice were bigger than the other ones. Or maybe they're just saying, look, there were 5 for these lords and for these 5 cities. And then they expound later here to say there were way more than 5 mice.
Where do you see this? Because you lost me.
Verse 17 and 18.
Right, so originally in verse 5, there's 5.
Or verse 6 or something like that,
5 mice, 5 tumors. And then what's the contrast here?
17 and 18 says there are 5 golden tumors and golden mice according to the number of all the cities of the Philistines, which is way more than 5.
Do we know how many cities there were at that time?
Way more than 5.
Yeah.
Yeah, it says in there, I got a paragraph Bible tonight, it's hard for me to find. But it says for each of the, verse 18, and the golden mice, according to the number of all the cities of the Philistines belonging to the 5 lords, both fortified cities, so walled cities, which are those 5 named, and unwalled villages, which would be a lot. Yeah, yeah.
So they brought this many more golden idols and of mice.
And it could be for however many cities, maybe they paraded the ark around to.
Couldn't it be lots of little mice?
Could be. That's what I'm saying. There could have been 5 main ones that were bigger and then a bunch of smaller ones for all the other cities. Who knows? We're speculating. But just remembering that this is how narratives work. Look, these is how stories work. When you go to Genesis, you'll see them jumping back and forth. And he goes ahead to tell you something, then he comes back to give you details on. That's how we all talk. If we're talking about something, I give you an account of something, I go back and be like, oh, but there was actually more than 5 mice. You know what I mean? There was actually mice for all these cities. It's not a lie or a contradiction. It's just unpacking more for you while they're telling the story. Like, that's how we actually talk. And so when we read it, we don't want to just be like, oh, this is a contradiction, Like, this isn't contradictory.
Well, it could be like, if you
We're going to get into something in a minute that we're going to probably have a little bit more effort on. But
yeah, I was just thinking if you went to Dunkin' Donuts and you had coffee, you're talking about I went to Dunkin' Donuts to get coffee, but I also have a dozen donuts in the car that I didn't bring up, but I'm talking about.
Well, I'm not going to tell everybody, right, when I eat the dozen donuts. Yeah, you all know me. It's too late. So, verse 18, look, they put it, excuse me. It says here, this is a great thing, which we talked about a little bit a couple weeks ago. The large stone, right? And so this is in Beth Shemesh, probably on Joshua's property they're talking about there. It says the large stone on which they set the ark of the Lord is a witness to this day. Here you go, in the field of Joshua, the Beth Shemite. And so this large stone is a witness to this day. Anybody remember us talking about that a couple weeks ago?
It's an Ebenezer.
Nice! Boom! Advanced Jedi points. And we got some cupcakes somewhere for you maybe next week. Because it was in chapter, they'll talk about it in verse 12 of chapter 7. So we'll see that maybe next week or the week after. That it says Samuel took a stone and set it up between Mizpah and Shen. And this is after they defeat the Philistines. And it says, he called the stone's name Ebenezer. And so, if I remember correctly, Ebenezer means stone of help. It talks about stone of remembrances, and you'll see that throughout the Old Testament and throughout biblical narrative. And we talked about some of those in a couple weeks ago. And so there's some references there for you. Genesis 28 is where Jacob gives thanks for God promising him and making covenants with him. And God brings a vision to him. And so Jacob meets God there. And he takes a stone and sets it up at that place and calls it Bethel. Anybody remember what Bethel means? what that name means? Beth El?
Son of-
Or know what the
son
name
of Beth.
El? Know what the name El means?
Son
Yeah,
of-
God.
Oh, L is, right.
El means God. El Shaddai, Elohim. All right, there's these different names for God. And so we find a lot of those in Genesis. But Beth El means the house of God. And so when God met with Jacob there, he set a stone there and called the stone and the place Bethel, meaning the house of God. And then he comes back there throughout his life, as do his descendants and his children's children, to this place called Bethel, called the house of God, because that's where he met God. In Joshua 4, we have a time where I think that I talked about that one a couple weeks ago, where Joshua is leading the Israelites into the promised land, and they cross through the Jordan River. And so, just like with Moses, God parted the Red Sea and they all came through. When Joshua led them in, they crossed the Jordan River. And when the Levites brought the Ark of God to the Jordan River, the Jordan parted, and they all followed the Levites with the Ark of God through on dry ground across the Jordan River into the promised land. Excuse me. And so when they did that, Joshua said to each of the 12 leaders of the tribes, go get a stone from the middle of the ground out of the parted waters and bring it up here on the land and set it up for a memorial to remind your children and your children's children. And every time you see these stones, you remember what just happened. And so these are stones of remembrances. And so I just bring these things up to say, that's Come Thou Fount. That's the song. Here I raise my Ebenezer. And the writer, the author of that hymn is saying, this song is my Ebenezer, is my stone of help. This is my dedication, my song of remembrance of what God's done in my life. And that's what he means there. And to that effect, he's saying, that we all should be raising Ebenezers. It doesn't mean we have to plant a tamarisk tree. It doesn't mean we have to put rocks in our yard. But if you understand what I'm saying, we should remember points in our life, right? Can you think about times in your life when you can look back and say, man, that was an Ebenezer, right? Like, here's a stone that I remember of something that God did in my life. It could have been, good thing. We all know that it ends up being good things, but it could have been a rough, difficult time in your life. It could have been a great, unbelievable overcoming in your life. It could have been many things, right? But we all, does everybody with me? We all kind of remember times in our life where God did something, and we remember it, and that's kind of what I'm trying to draw out, I guess, in this Ebenezer idea, and we'll see that again in the next chapter also. Does that make sense? Thoughts, questions, comments thus far as we get into verse 19, because we're going to see a significant shift here, and we're going to talk about something here too. Okay. Well, let's get into
I'm
it.
just waiting for you to get 19.
Right.
Yep, we're in 19 now. So
There you go.
19.
Been waiting patiently.
Yeah, good. And so, there's been a lot of good application too. So we're going to kind of get into some maybe, deep into the pool and some weeds and some teaching here. But certainly we've seen the Ebenezer, we've seen the worshiping God and how he calls us to, we've seen a lot of good things that we can apply. And here we see, the scene shift because what's happening here, man? Verse 19. You looking at it?
Mm-hmm.
What's going on? Perhaps you caught it when we read, and I don't remember who read that verse. Maybe I think it was Elaine's verse.
My Bible doesn't say that many people.
Okay,
It
so
does have a note about it.
okay, good.
Doesn't say 50,000?
No.
Oh,
Says
Mine
70,
says,
right?
70.
Because that's what I.
70 people or 70,000?
70 men.
And the note says, the additional 50,000 in most Hebrew manuscripts is apparently a copyist's mistake because it is added in an ungrammatical way. Furthermore, this small town could not have contained that many inhabitants.
Okay, that's what we're going to unpack right now. You have an ESV?
NIV.
NIV, yep.
Okay,
So,
what does yours say?
50,070.
Oh, sorry, but it said 50,000 or 50,000?
50,070.
I listened to the sermon on it,
And
and
it
they
said 70?
said, so I knew that it was questionable.
Okay.
Well, here's the thing, because I would say to you what you read from the NASB is the most highly critical Bible and the most accurate Bible.
Yeah.
Would be the NASB and the King James and the New King James.
Well, it says great slaughter.
But before we get there, that's what I say. God struck down some of the men. Why? Because when we look at that, we see verse 19, and he struck some of the men. Who's he? God. God's now killing these men. Why?
Well, wasn't all the gold on the, inside the ark that they were bringing? So was it just out of greed that they were looking? Why
Well,
were they looking?
yeah, it said they looked into the ark of the Lord,
Is
right?
that where all the gold, all this,
No, they put the gold stuff in a
okay,
box
so that's
beside it.
already gone, okay.
Yep.
They just wanted to see what was in it, but they're being very disrespectful and.
Yeah.
Yeah, and disobedient. They're not supposed to look in there. And in fact, the ark probably would have been nailed or screwed shut.
Oh, so it took effort.
And so it would take effort to open it. We find out in later verses, that the ark contained the stones of the commandments, as well as a jar of manna, and Aaron's staff later is in the ark of the covenant. So, they were, remember, only a select few were allowed to touch it and only move it in a certain way. And we're going to get to that later when Uzzah's killed for trying to do what he thinks is a good thing.
Right.
And so we see that here, that God takes very serious, which we went through this in our church study. Remember the study of the church that we did before this? And we keep coming back to this even now to see where God judged Israel, God judged the Philistines, and now God judges Israelites again. Why? Because God takes his glory very seriously. He takes being worshipped very seriously. And that's why we too should take it seriously. And if you remember how we talked about that in the church study. And so he desires to be worshipped in the way that he tells you to worship him. And when you don't do that, there are consequences.
And that's an important bookend to the whole thing.
Hey, Craig.
Oh, yeah, Jason.
Yeah, so, I use my phone, and going from the ESV to the NASB 95, that's a huge difference on what it says.
Yeah,
And with the ESV, when it says he, made that destruction, so to speak, it's lowercase
yep,
he. It's not capital,
correct.
which makes it even more convoluted,
Well,
to say the least.
so the ESV doesn't always do that. The NASB has it capitalized and always capitalizes deity, but ESV doesn't always do that. So that's just a different little discrepancy. It doesn't mean, the ESV certainly is implying that he to be God.
Right.
But before we dig into that too deep, I know, oh, sorry, thought you were finished.
No, and it goes from, from 70 to, 50,070.
Yep.
So like the numbers are much greater, one versus the other,
Yeah,
which
Yep.
just, it's just hard for me to understand and wrap my brain around that as well.
good. Yeah, and not good that it's confusing, but good that we're going to talk about it too in a minute. But sorry, Elaine had a thought there before we do.
That this event of striking them down, even though they were appropriately thankful, it was like a bookend of, I have brought all this about because Phinehas, whatever
Yep,
those
Phineas and Hophni.
names were,
Yeah.
were not doing things, not acting on my behalf the way they should.
Yeah,
You're not gonna be able to continue that here.
good.
The
Yeah.
mark's back and you can't keep on
Yes.
Disrespecting,
right, yeah.
disobedient, yeah,
Yeah.
nip it in the butt, that's what I say.
Yeah, for sure. Great point, because which feeds right into what we were just talking about, that God demands right worship, and there's consequences for not doing that, and so we've seen that with Hophni and Phineas. We now see that with these men here, and so good point to make. So let's talk about it a little bit more now. Verse 19. This is what we call a textual variance. And when you study the scriptures, you're going to find a lot of this, actually. Textual variance, or what's known as textual criticism. Let's talk about it a little bit. Does anybody know what that means? Does anybody know what a textual variance is? or what textual criticism is, and most importantly, why does this matter and why should we talk about it? Why is it important? I think with all your questions and thoughts already that you already expressed, we see why it's important.
Yeah, it's just when things don't line up from one version to another, so to speak.
Yeah, and from versions being the key, from our English versions. And so a textual variance is something that translators chose to translate differently in their committees. And so when we talk about a textual criticism happens for all writings, not just the Bible. It's what you hold it to, it's the standard, it is how much work has gone into trying to be diligent. And in this case, with the Bible, you're trying to translate Hebrew into English, and you're trying to translate Aramaic and Greek into English. And there isn't always a direct word for word translation. And so to make it easy, thought is when you talk about translations, there's things that are called formal equivalents, and then there's dynamic equivalents. And these are all just words you probably won't remember unless you write them down or study it more. But the point is, you have translations that are word for word translations. That's what they're called. They try to look at the Greek word and write the English word that is the same word. Then you have other ones that are kind of thought for thought translations. These are ones that will read the verse and then write out what the verse, read it in Greek, write it out in English, what it means in English. Your word for word translations would be the most highly criticized ones, meaning, better job of getting, and then you have even trickle down worse translations would be like what are called paragraph translations, where basically they're reading almost like a paragraph of 6 verses and then just writing in English out what it means. And you've read Bibles that might, maybe the Message, which I would say never read, but the Message and other Bibles that are just like that, they don't sound like any of the other versions almost. And so a word for word translation would be the NASB, the New American Standard Bible. It'd be the King James, the New King James. A thought for thought would be the NIV, the NLT, the CSB, if you're familiar with some of these. And so just to kind of give you an understanding of what that means. And so the ones that are highly criticized more, and so they're doing more work to say, like, every single word is what we're trying to do. Here's the Hebrew word. What does that word translate exactly to in English? And write it here. The next word is the next word. The next word is the next word. And so those would be the ones that would be most accurate most of the time.
But I get that, and I've read different types of Bibles, and I've seen like how they've summarized in another place where they've been, maybe it's even harder to read in a King James, but you can see like where they did go word for word versus kind of summarizing the thought of the other person. But this is such a discrepancy. They're not saying, hey, a bunch of people got together and went
We're going to get there.
Okay, because the numbers are so far off.
Yep.
I mean, I feel like
This is your seminary section of the class. We're going to get there. That's just step one. I'm just trying to kind of explain because these are good questions, right? And so Jason's thoughts, Jason's questions, I know probably everybody else, same Jen, all of us have kind of expressed some of those because I just want you to understand what textual criticism is, and that's what that is. Then a textual variance would mean that this version, this English version, says it a little bit different than this English version. So, for instance, there's textual variance all throughout the scriptures. And that's where, for instance, if we take the NIV, so you have an NIV here tonight. If we look at some of the Gospels or many other places where I could show you textual variances, the NIV skips and leaves those verses out.
Yeah, we've talked about that.
Well, we just saw it a couple Sunday mornings ago, where yours will go verse 31 to verse 33, and it skips a verse completely and leaves it out. And so, so there are others like the ESV or the NASB that'll leave. The NASB will leave all that in there and put brackets around it or parentheses, which is showing you this is not in all the translations. This is not in all the text, and I'm not going to bore you and get you into all the just all the stuff of the committees that do these translations, okay? You can look into that if you're interested in digging in and having fun with the Texas Receptus and all those things. So, but just to say that there are variances or discrepancies, and I hope that when we end this discussion here in the next 15 minutes, we understand. I don't want to, throw shade or doubt on anyone about God's word. That what it says, it says. And so let me lead off up front with, regardless of exactly how many people this was, they were people who were punished and killed by God for what they just did here. Now, why there may be a discrepancy here is, look, some people read this. I don't think I went over the last slide. So there's your NASB, King James, New King James. So some of the versions say 50,070 men were killed. Some other versions say 70 men were killed. So which is it? And so I say to you, here's what it is. Commentators, versions, you can find the old texts that say this one, old texts that say that one. But because you don't have, I wish Joe and Yolanda were here, because I don't know Spanish. If you know English and you know Spanish, you will know that there's Spanish, there's, Cuban Spanish, there's Puerto Rican Spanish, there's all these different dialects, which is like that with pretty much every language, like slang with English or whatever. And there is not always a direct translation because, especially for figures of speech and slang and things that they say, that we don't understand what they mean. And so that's what's happening here. When you go to it, some read it this way, that it's 50,070 men. Some people read it to say that it's 70 people that are as valuable as 50,000 men. Meaning, in the original, this is the idea that they can't translate exactly. And what they're trying to get from the iterism or the wording of the phrase, the slang, if you will, that they use in the Hebrew, not Hebrew, Hebrew, we're in the Old Testament. The slang of the Hebrew and what they say here, that they're saying, okay, it could be that 70 men were killed, and they're saying there is a 50,000 in here somewhere. And that's where the problem lies here. They're saying it's 70 men who are as valuable as 50,000 men, referring to these were 70 priests and Levites that were killed. So perhaps their life, is more as valuable as, like, say God killed 50,000 normal men. And so that's a thought. That's an idea. I think it's a pretty good one. Others read it to say it was 50 out of every 1,000, which I made it easier math for you to say that it's 1 out of every 20 people in that area that he just killed. Out of the representation, he killed 70 to represent that number. So it's like 50 out of 1,000. Or some read it to say that it's 70 men and 50,000 men. So it could have been 70 priests that he killed and 50,000 people, not just even in Bethshemesh, but possibly of all of Israel that he killed because of other judgment and other things. And so, and that one, I think to me holds water too, because, and you're not going to pin me down on any one of these what it says, because I'm just going to go with it was whatever the number God said, and we don't have the exact number in our English Bible to know what that is. We can ask him one day. But, there is many a times where it uses this kind of language. I just used one actually on Sunday that comes to mind. 70 weeks of Daniel. And it says in there that Daniel says that know that from the time of the decree to go back and restore and rebuild the city of Jerusalem, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. He doesn't say 69 weeks. He says there'll be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. There's many a time where they say that. This and that, meaning add them together. And so that could possibly be that it's a 50,000 and 70, and that's why the NASB and the King James, who are the more literal versions, add them together to say 50,000 and 70. So I'll pause there to stop for that, to get you thoughts and commentaries and questions, and Jason, see if that helps make it a little bit more murky for you. But this is really the best that I can do with my limited knowledge and studies of these types of things over the years, to say that there is in the original some kind of saying and the wording and the numbers of 70 and 50,000. And so how do we reconcile that? We just don't really know. So it could be 70, it could be 50,070, It just is why you see a big discrepancy, and why I always say the NASB is, I think, the most accurate translation, and it says 50,000 when the other one says 70. Now you see why. Because it says 70 and 50,000, and so they would add that together, kind of like the weeks of Daniel or other things that you see.
And it doesn't change the point of the.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And that's where we got to land. In our maturity, we got to land in God preserved it for us to see this, and however many it was, it is what happened. Thoughts, questions? You guys, Zoomers, you can open up your mics there too. And Jason, if you have, I don't know if that helps at all or just makes you more confused.
But it would have taken a lot of discussion in the very first place
Oh.
for the NASB, I mean, for them to find.
Imagine being in the room where you're reading the original and trying to write down, and knowing your accountability to God's word, trying to write what it actually means. Think about these men who did this. Like, I don't want to be that guy. You know?
I think it makes a lot of sense. You gave good examples of why different men would have read it different, you know, and how they're trying to do their best to tell you something from a different language, which doesn't always translate.
Yeah, there's a lot of figures of speech and symbolism, hyperbole. I mean, on and on and on that we use every day in our life. You know what I mean? So knock on wood. You know, knock on wood. What would they think when you said that?
Yeah.
Some of these things you just don't know unless you're in the culture and know what it means.
I was gonna say, if you've ever taken another language class, it's just like mind blowing.
Yeah.
How do you, and at work all the time, they'll say, there's no word to say what I'm trying to say.
Correct.
Like, they'll just tell me, that's not a word, just hold
People
on.
who speak fluent
Yeah,
English,
different
well
languages.
English and Spanish say that. Joe and Yolanda would say that. Pastor Alex, you know, good friend of mine. Like, these guys know, but they still come to things where they're like, I don't know what the words are for that. Like, I don't know how to tell
So
you
then
what
they'll
that
tell you
means.
in a different way.
And that's just modern Spanish and English. Now you're talking about ancient Hebrew and modern English. You know? Like Jason, like you said, 1995 NASB. You know what I mean? Or there's even a 2020 NASB, you know? And so you're talking about very modern English versus very ancient Hebrew. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the main point is the fact that, you know, God put a wrath on those folks that did something that obviously shouldn't have been done.
Yeah.
And I think the NASB describes it a little bit more so in the understanding versus the ESV, because, you know, in the NASB it says they had looked into the ark of the Lord.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, the ESV could be a little bit more misunderstanding when it says they looked upon the ark of the Lord.
Yeah. And again, that's another one of those words with the
So
translation.
So to me, like, when it says they looked into the ark of the Lord, it's like they're like, you know,
Violating it.
examining the contents of the ark, touching it, looking in it, being
Yeah.
part of it, versus just looking at it, so to speak.
Sure.
Because I feel like just looking at it, it's not much, but to be able to, you know, and maybe they're doing so because maybe they knew what was in it before it left, and now they're.
Or they don't, to your point. Maybe they're curious. Maybe they have a pride thing. Maybe there's all kinds of things there that I think lead you, Jason. You're leading my thoughts back to Elaine's thoughts when she was articulating about the ultimate thing that you're going to. The ultimate thing of God's judgment. Look, we saw he killed Hophni and Phinehas and 34,000 people of Israel for how they were idolatizing the ark. Now, as Jason says, they're doing things to the ark they're not supposed to be doing when he just brought it back. I believe, he probably did kill 70 priests, and he killed 2 priests and 34,000 last time. Is it too far-fetched to think that the proper interpretation is now he kills 70 and 50,000 people? Yeah, I think that's probably accurate. Because of what you just said, Jason, you just convinced me. Like, because of what he just said about what they're doing, we saw what happened 7 months earlier, 34,000 and 2 priests. Now he comes back, gives them another shot, and they look into the ark. So you got 70 and 50,000. You know what I mean? Like, boom, more judgment. So to me, that makes sense to me.
Like, that means they got away with it initially, that people kept going. Cause that
Keep
70 people
showing
even
them,
couldn't
don't
look in it
do
at
it,
once,
yeah.
that means a whole bunch
Sure.
coming through and doing.
And I don't even, and who knows that all
Maybe
70
he
looked
was
at it.
weeding 'em out.
Right. He just could have
But
judged
he
70 of
Could have
them
judged 70. 'cause
and
they-
50,000
because
because
they
the
were
other
the-
50,000 didn't look at it.
Because they were
But
the
he judged them
leaders.
anyway.
They were supposed to tell them and lead the people, and they obviously weren't telling the people strongly enough how serious he was.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the Garden of Eden with the apple. It's like,
Yeah.
eat anything, here's this wonderful garden, don't eat that apple, and here they are with the ark. You can
This
have
is-
everything,
this
I've
is
given
us.
you everything.
Yeah.
Don't touch the ark, I've given you these perimeters, but I'm giving you all this gold, I brought it back to you, I tripled your value, you know what I mean? But don't touch it, and then of course you gotta touch it, because that's the thing, that's who we are.
That is who we are. Look,
There's
we
the
are
apple.
we are law breakers.
Yeah.
That's
Here's the one thing
our
don't
problem.
do. Don't go inside the ark, boom, there's, people gotta go inside the ark.
Correct.
Please have that hunger to look into my word instead.
Woo, get them.
Amen. And speaking of, as I'm looking at 7:59, I hope you guys can hold out for a couple more minutes because I want us to look at a couple scriptures here tonight. And let's just flip right to, if you'll turn to John 3:16, let's just go right there because that one's such well known, and we're in the study of John in our Sunday morning services. We'll be in chapter 3 soon, but let's go there, and I'll just kind of go to that one because I think they say in verse 20, as we try to close these last verses, look at what they say in verse 20. The Israelites, and you're turning, so that's okay. The Israelites say back in our text, who is able to stand before the Lord, this holy God? This holy God who wiped out our priest and 30,000 men, and now who just wiped out, let's just go with 50,000 men and priests. Who is able to stand? And so I just had to present that to us tonight, even if we're amongst all of us being believers, to say what you just said. We are lawbreakers. We are the ones who look in the ark. We are the ones who eat the fruit. We are the ones who break the law. We are the ones who do these things. And so who can stand before this holy God? And that should be where we live our lives. Not in fear, because we're saved and we're redeemed, and we rejoice in that, and we are to live in that hope and that joy. But to keep us in the moment of understanding who we are. Who can stand before a holy God? Well, Romans 3:23 says, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And so we've all failed miserably in that. And so Revelation 20, you can write these down and look at them in your own study time later. 2 Corinthians 5 is where Paul says, we will all stand before the Bema seat, or we will all stand before the judgment seat of Christ. And that's talking to believers. So I'm just trying to put a little bit of a reality and some meat on the bones here for us. And then now we come to John 3:16, because when we think of John 3:16, we always think of, gospel, God loves, God saves, and again with the church that we live in, it's not surprising that it's always only about John 3:16. But in the reality of Bible and learning the Bible and studying it, you have to continue to read in context. So let's look at it. 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life. Praise the Lord, amen. Now 17. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but in order that the world might be saved through him. Amen. Whosoever believes in him is not condemned, but whoever does not believe in him is condemned already, because he has not believed in the name of the only Son of God. And so, again, we just see the two groups. We see him in Samuel. We see him in Romans. We see him in John. We see him everywhere. That here's the two groups, and we see the contrast of Israel and Philistia in the text, and the contrast just continues to be there. And I think it's just a good reminder for us that who can stand before a holy God? Absolutely no one. And not you and not me, but for the grace of God. But for Jesus taking that on himself to make a way for us to... That's what he did. He took on our wrath and condemnation and punishment in order that we can stand before a holy God. That's it. In a nutshell, that's the entire book. You sum up the book in one sentence. There's your Cliff Notes version. Yeah. He stood before God so that we could stand before God. He took the wrath of God so that we could stand before a holy God. And so as they ask that, it just hit me to the core. Like, who can stand before this holy God? Yeah, no one can. So thank you, Jesus. Yeah, thank you, Jesus. And then verse 21 in the text closes out this section. Where do we start? Verse 13? Remember how they were when it started in verse 13? They saw the milk cows come into the ark, and it said they were glad. How do you think they feel now? How do you think they feel now? What do we got? 8 verses? 8 verses later, they're terrified of the ark of God and of the wrath of the Lord. I mean, just there's another a picture of our life. There's a picture of who we are. Now, we're not terrified of God in the sense that we should be terrified that we lose our salvation. But I mean, just the ups and downs of life, right? We could see this and apply to this. And so it's funny, isn't it, that they end kind of in the same mindset of the Philistines. Remember the Philistines, Jen, when the tumors started breaking out in the one town? Let's send this off to the other town. Let's send this off to and see if anybody else will take this thing from us.
Yeah,
That's what they do. So the
Levi.
Levites and the Beth Shemesh, right? They're the Levites. They send it to it says to Kiriath Jearim, and so Kiriath Jearim is a town of the tribe of Judah, and so they send the ark off to Kiriath Jearim and say to Judah, "Hey, you guys take this thing for a while. We're done with it." Very very interesting, kind of symmetrical, right, and circular coming back again. But anyways, I know we're 4 minutes over. Thanks for hanging in there with me. Zoomers, thoughts, commentary, questions on any or all of the above? And remember,
I
you're
just
on.
like the irony of it all, of, like you just explained, how they're so excited at first, and now, God's wrath is upon them because of what they did to the ark, and now they're like, oh, well, hey, let's give it to these other godly people. We don't want it because we don't want to be more wrath.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was kind of like when they went into battle and they were all excited to see the ark then too,
Yes.
for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, that's a good point, though. Another good symmetrical parallel to pull in. Yeah, because by the time they got home and hear of everybody's death and all the things that happened, they were then terrified also.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Anybody else? Well, I think we pulled I think we pulled a lot of. It's a good thing we record these things. I can go back and try to remember it all, because I think tonight I think we squeezed a lot out of the lemon tonight, man. I think we pulled back some layers of the onions here tonight. I remember at least 3-4 points of application, that's prevalent in this text. So again, not always the case with a narrative, but then sometimes you get into a narrative and there's just so much meat in there for you, and for me. And I feel like we got that tonight for sure. So thanks for all the input on the insight. And and we got to jump deep into the pool a little bit and learn about textual variances. Yay, fun! Isn't it fun?
It was.
Yeah,
When I was picking the Bible out, that was important to look into.
Good. Textual, and textual criticism, all those things. I mean, these are the things that, are important. As Steve and I talk about often, there's much more to pastoring, especially the shepherding portion of pastoring. There's more to it than just knowledge, right, and just teaching. Now, we want people to grow in knowledge, and you'll constantly hear me say that because the Bible constantly says that. Paul writes it in like every letter. Grow in your knowledge and understanding. Why? Because that's how you're sanctified. That's how you grow to understand these things. If we don't teach this when we come across something like this, then what's going to happen? It's the questions Jason had and Jen had and Jill had to say, like, what does this mean? It's a contradiction. That's why you see people, even believers, saying like, well, this one says this and this one says this. Well, your Bible doesn't even have that verse in it. You know what I mean? Like, how do you explain these things? You should know, as you start to read your Bible and say, oh, why is it like that? Well, that should prompt you to go and to study why is it like that. And so important. So thanks for hanging there with me as I tried to walk us through that. But good stuff. Yeah, thank you guys. Thanks so much. Lord, we give you thanks for all things. Because we know that every good and perfect gift comes from you. And as we read about this text and the narrative that happened thousands of years ago, but God, we know to you 1,000 years is as a day, and a day is 1,000 years, and you are outside of time, and you are the God of all creation and have a plan for all of it. And so we thank you for the things that we glean from these truths of your word, and through the power of your Spirit that unites us and causes us to be born again, and to your family. So thank you for adopting us, for calling us your children. Pray that we would certainly be able to understand and grow in our knowledge of your word. And again, not just for head knowledge, but that we would be able to apply it in our lives and to help one another in each other's sanctification. And that's why we do this, so that we could better love you, better worship you, and ultimately also better love one another and be productive and beneficial to one another, for that's why you've called us together. So we thank you for it all in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Good to see you.